live. Welcome everybody. Hi guys. I'm just going to change my speaker view so I can see everybody. Good. I was going to say good morning. Oh, it is still morning. Just. Hello everybody. Lovely to see you. I'm just going to move you on my screen. One sec, so I can see all of your lovely faces. So nice to see all of you, and Danielle from Australia. Like we're global, guys. This is amazing. Lovely to see all of you. So before I was going to try and play a bit of music actually to kind of get us all in the mood, but I actually tried that on a Facebook live stream the other day, and I then got a really terrible message from Facebook going, "You haven't got copyright on that track. You can't play it." And I was like, "Oh God, yeah." So turn all your Alexa apps off, because otherwise they might start talking to us. So yeah, a massive welcome to the first week of the financial coaching training. I'm really super excited to be working with all of you over the next 3 months. Kind of in lockdown and beyond, hopefully, but we'll see how that all sort of fares out over the next few weeks. So just a couple of housekeeping rules actually. First of all, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with how Zoom works by now. I think Zoom has become an integral part of our lives, certainly over the last couple of weeks. But just in case you're not familiar with the setup of Zoom, you'll notice in the top right hand corner you've got a little box that says speaker view, or it may actually appear like a cube with about 8 dots in the middle. If you click on that, you can change how you actually see people on your screen. So I always like the speaker view because you can see everybody's face on the screen rather than just me as a giant person in the middle of your screen. So just have a little play around with the speaker view and see which one you prefer. You'll notice that the session's being recorded, and that's for 2 reasons. One is from a training perspective, because it'll be nice for me to go back and watch that to see how I can make improvements to the program. But also, if anybody misses any of the sessions, we do obviously have our Thursday evening session 2, which all of you are welcome. If you want to do 2 sessions a week, that's absolutely fine. But if there are some weeks that you are maybe committed to doing the Wednesday morning, afternoon slot, but for whatever reason something crops up, as things always do, and you can't make it, don't worry, just jump into the Thursday evening session, which is 6 till 8 o'clock in the evening. So you can mix them up. You could do an afternoon session and an evening session, but we are going to put you into accountability support groups. So in an ideal world, if you can stick to the same session, that would be great. But if you can't, don't worry, we've got your back either way. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping. What I would really love to do, first of all, I'm just going to share my screen in a second. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint, people. You're going to get more from this program by the doing and the learning. So it's going to be a very interactive program. But I am going to get you to do a little bit of an introduction, first of all, because some of you may know each other, some of you may not. And because the groups that you're going to be put into will be your accountability support buddies over the next 3 months, then it'll be nice to have an opportunity to get to know one another as well. Just before we go into that introduction session, Marcus, well, he's currently in my top left-hand corner. I don't know where he is on your screen, but Marcus, give us a wave. Marcus is going to be our teleporter. He's helping me to facilitate the program as well as being a participant. He's going to be teleporting himself into the breakout rooms. Now, I've been in lots of different programs in the UK and the US, and I'm not a big fan actually of when the host kind of comes in and secretly spies on your conversations, because sometimes actually some good conversations go on when the host isn't there. So Marcus is going to be kind of teleporting himself into the breakout rooms that we're going to be having over the 12 weeks. And I'd rather give you the opportunity to kind of have that choice as to whether you want to have me in your breakout rooms or not. So I'll talk you through how you go about calling me out of the main Zoom room into your breakout groups if you need some extra support, or you like my opinion, or you just want me to be present in one of your groups. And equally, if Marcus feels like when he's teleporting, a bit like Doctor Who Marcus, when he's teleporting, if he feels that there is a group that does need a little bit of extra support, then he'll message me and I'll come and jump in. So I hope that's okay with everybody. But as I say, we'll just kind of play this by ear as we go through the program. And if you'd rather have me in the groups, then I would love to be and to do that to support you as well. So I'm just going to share my screen. Just bear with me 1 second. Right, share screen. Marcus, can you do me a favour? Can you go into, there's a box on the bottom that says security.
Oh, right.
Can you click on that, and can you click on allow participants to share? Oh, hold on, maybe I can do it actually.
I've just added you as a co-host, so that'll probably.
Perfect. There we go. Thank you very much. There we go. Okay, wicked. Right, let me just enlarge that. Right, can you all see a presentation in front of you?
Looks clear to me.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Okay. Okay, great. So the first thing that we're going to do then is to give you a couple of minutes in a breakout room to make an introduction. And I'd like you to just kind of spend 2 minutes each. We're going to go into, I think, roughly 4 groups of 4. Have we got that sort of number, Marcus, today?
Yeah, that's my plan. I'm just sorting it out.
Perfect. We're going to put you into, so 4 groups of 4. And I'd like you just to spend 2 minutes each in that group. And I'd like you just to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you're most excited about getting from this program, and 1 fun fact about yourself. So I'll start because I'm not going to be coming into the breakout rooms. But obviously, you know, my name's Catherine Morgan. I am the host of our financial coaching program. I run a business called the Money Panel. I've run that business for 3.5 years now. I've been in financial services since I was 18, so I know nothing else other than financial services. And I became very disillusioned in the early days of being in the banking sector, which was very heavily reliant on products and just selling products. And I then started the Money Panel basically on a mission to help women, to empower them to be more adequately equipped from a practical perspective, but also from an emotional perspective. Because actually for me, the two things have to happen together. There's no point in showing somebody the practical tips of how to manage money if they haven't got the beliefs behind it, or they've got self-sabotaging beliefs, or they don't feel good about money. Because then, you know, we all know how to manage money. We know we should be managing money, but we don't always follow that. And that's often because of the subconscious beliefs and all the emotions that we feel around money. So that's who I am. That's why I do what I do. My purpose and mission is to help equip and prepare 1 million women to be financially resilient and to create some change in the financial services profession in this country. And then 1 fun fact about myself, I used to be a film extra. I was a film extra in The Young Victoria, the opening scene actually, with the coronation of Queen Victoria. I was standing in the, I don't even know what the word is, standing in the crowd and cheering God Save the Queen. And we did it in Shepperton Studios. We had to stand on this like scaffold unit with a piece of red carpet over it and repeat the same sentence about 50 times. And then obviously they use the magic of technology to make it look like we were actually standing in a cathedral, which we weren't. We were in just a very cold, dark, dingy filming studio. So that's the fun fact about me. So Marcus, are we ready to go into the breakout groups?
I believe so.
Wonderful. So 2 minutes each way, guys, in your group, who you are, where you're from, why you're here, and 1 fun fact about yourself. I'll see you shortly. Again.
That's everyone back now.
There we go. I was just saying, actually, one of the things that we're doing to manage time effectively is you'll notice that little timer comes up, so you've got like 60 seconds left. It's almost like the creep of death, because you either wait and you literally chat till the last seconds, or you can just click on the button that says to choose to come back to the main room. Either is absolutely fine. But it's always a good sign when no one comes back in straight away, that everyone's still chatting until the final second. And actually on that note, so 2 things just to let you know, you may have noticed at the bottom of your screen while you're in the breakout rooms, there's like a little help button. So if you are in any of the breakout sessions and you do want either myself or Marcus to come and give you some support, just click on that button and then it requests for us to come back in from the main room. So just to let you know that that's there. You'll also notice in the screen now, you've got a little bubble, speech bubble at the bottom that says chat. So I will encourage you, particularly over this next session that we're going to do, to use that chat button, because that will then come up on the right-hand side of your screen. You can chat to people privately, or you can chat to everybody. So when you do put a comment in the box, make sure you click on the little button above it that's got the blue arrow, and that will allow you to either select to message to everybody or to somebody privately. So just to let you know. Okay, great. So now that you're all kind of introduced to one another, I know one or two of you didn't get an opportunity to speak, but don't worry, you're going to be in the same groups for as long as possible, and certainly for the rest of today at least. So you'll have lots of opportunity to have some chats. One of the things I also just wanted to say is that I obviously have a structure over each of the weeks, what I'm going to be teaching you. And it isn't going to be death by PowerPoint. And I don't also want you to have to worry about sitting there and making copious notes, okay? Because you're not going to learn as much from the copious note taking as you will from the actual participation. So if you need copies of the slides that we are using in the sessions, then we can put those into the membership area that you'll all have access to. So don't worry about having to kind of make copious notes around any of the slides. You would have noticed on the welcome email we templates. One is like a notes template. You may just have your own notepads, which is absolutely fine. And there was also in there, which hopefully many of you have seen, a disempowering beliefs sheet. Now, the reason that we've given you that, and we're going to be talking about this actually predominantly actually in week 3, is that when it comes to change work, some of the exercises that we're going to ask you to actually participate in yourself are going to get you really thinking, and are going to get that subconscious mind working, and sometimes in a way that you've never worked before. Now, the brain doesn't like change. It doesn't like anything complicated. It doesn't like change. So if anything comes up for you during the program that feels like you're resisting something, then it needs to go on that disempowering beliefs page, because that's going to be at the end of the program. You may end up with 5 or 6 or 50 bullet points on that disempowering beliefs page. And we are going to do an exercise later in the program about what do you do with those disempowering beliefs. And as you'll experience in this program, all of the exercises that we're doing and sharing with you in the program, you'll be experiencing first before you then potentially start using them with your clients. And I think that's actually a really important part of the process, because unless you experience the change work for yourself first, we don't know actually how we're going to use that in the real world, in the financial planning world. So there's that worksheet's available for you. Every Thursday evening, just to let you guys know, so because we have the 2 sessions, every Thursday evening you'll get an email from me that will have a little piece of homework on there. So this week there'll be 2 documents for you to print out, and I'll share with you what they are at the end of this session. But just keep an eye out for that email on Thursday night at 9 o'clock is when it will come out to you. So if you haven't received it by kind of 9:30 on a Thursday night, just feel free to message me or pop me an email just to let me know that you haven't received it. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen again. Let's just make that a bit bigger. Let me just change my layout. There we go. Okay, so we've done our introductions. Now, I'm going to go through a very, very quick 2-minute exercise with you that we call the learning state. This is something we're going to do at the start of every single session together. Because an ideal state for you to be in order for you to learn most effectively, is something called the learning state. It actually comes from an NLP exercise, neuro-linguistic programming, which is all to do with the way that the brain operates. So the ideal state for you to learn from is the learning state. It's how information actually is soaked up, not just through the conscious mind, but through the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind. And it's a really easy thing to do. You're probably already doing it without even being aware of it. But I just for a moment want you to look past your screen, and whether you've got a window behind that or a wall, I just want you to focus on one specific point on the wall or the window or whatever is beyond your screen. Okay, and I want you to focus on that one particular area, and make sure that you're really comfortable as well. Have a little shift around in your chair, Just bring some consciousness to where your legs are positioned, how your shoulders are positioned, whether they're raised or whether they're relaxed. And I just want you to focus your attention on that one spot. And very slowly, I want you to start to expand your vision and awareness out from that point. So keeping your eyes on that point, on that spot, just slowly start to expand your vision and awareness outside from that point. So notice what's to the left, keeping your eyes on the point, but notice through your peripheral vision what's to the left, what's to the right, what's above and what's below that point. And you should notice you start to feel a little bit calmer, a little bit more relaxed. And the state that you're now in is the learning state. So this is where we learn best. So this allows us to retrieve information from our brains after the session's finished. It allows us to then be able to retrieve that information back again. It's a bit like a kind of daydream-like state, which often we just get into naturally. And the other thing you can do, and there's another version of this exercise, which I'll just share with you, and you can decide which one you want to do for each of the sessions, is if you just draw your attention back to the screen for a moment. And what I want you to do is something called the sausage test. Some of you may be familiar with this. And what you can do is you can get both hands and bring them up to the line of your vision. So essentially you want to be able to bring your fingers together in the middle in front of your eyes. And what you want to do is to bring your fingers, so just use one finger, left and right, and bring them very slowly together in front of your eyes, from left to right into the middle. And just before they meet in the middle, you'll notice a sausage-like shape appear in between your two fingers, possibly before you start to go a bit cross-eyed. And that's another way that you can expand your peripheral vision. So you start by looking ahead, and you'll notice your left and your right hand outside of the point that you're focused on. And as you bring them closer, you'll start to then notice a crossover with your fingers. And just before that, you start to see a sausage shape. So there's two ways of doing that exercise. You can choose which one you'd like to do. But if you ever get into a learning situation, this is a great exercise to do before you go into a client meeting. Because depending on what has been going on for you before that client meeting, you may have been charging from one to another, you might be late, you might have been stuck in traffic, all sorts of things can happen. You might have had a really stressful telephone call or a stressful board meeting, for example. So actually using that learning state can actually just very gently calm the brain and get it into a position of ready for learning. Okay, so let's go on to the next screen. So in today's, so just to remind you actually, at the end of this program, obviously you'll all be issued with a CPD certificate with all of your learning objectives. But in today's week one, you'll essentially come out with 3 specific objectives. The first one is understanding what is financial coaching. What are the benefits it can bring to you, your clients in the process? The second thing is understanding and describing your own beliefs about money and how this influences the interactions that you have with others and particularly with your clients. And the third one is understanding and explaining the cognitive processes that are at play during the conversations about money and how these influence communications between us and our clients. So the first question I wanted to kind of throw out to everybody actually, and I'd like you to use the chat box for this particular exercise. And I'm just going to bring the chat box up on my screen at the same time. There we go. And I'd like you just to pop in the comments, what do you believe financial coaching is? So some of you may already be using financial coaching tools in your business. Some of you may have done previous financial coaching courses or read some books. What would be your definition of financial coaching? And just make sure when you pop the message in that you've selected everybody rather than somebody privately. Lovely. So Gretchen's saying a way to delve deeper into clients' feelings about money. The point where financial planning and financial psychology overlap. Oh, I love that one. Some great ones there. Simon, helping clients understand their behaviors and beliefs around money. Lovely. Kate, helping clients to understand their own attitudes and beliefs around money. Yeah, that's the way, Kate, you said there, to understand. That's really key. It needs to come from the client, not from us. Julie, asking questions to help clients identify how and why they make decisions, and then helping them adapt to achieve meaning for them. Lovely. Marcus, the tools that help us help our clients come to understand their feelings about money. Yeah, fantastic. Catherine, helping people understand their money beliefs and emotions and overcoming them to create a positive relationship. Lovely. Jess, helping clients through questioning and goal setting to understand their beliefs and why they react to money. Yeah, so lots and lots of synergy there about, it's about understanding how the client feels about money, that, as Rajesh is saying, how that can limit their financial decisions. And this is a really interesting conversation in itself, I think, because one of the things I think we are terrible at in financial services, I don't know what it's like over in Australia, Danielle, but certainly in the UK, we use so many different titles for everything. It's like financial coaching, financial well-being, behavioral finance, financial psychology, financial therapy, financial planning, lifestyle financial planning. There's so many different titles. It's no wonder it's quite confusing to, you know, the ordinary consumer. But for me, financial coaching is exactly what you've described. It's those two things. It's understanding how they behave, which obviously is going to involve a lot of emotion. And it's also involving the practical aspects, because that's what we're naturally very, very good at as financial advisors, financial planners, mortgage advisors. When you're in that advice world, we've been taught to come up with solutions for our clients. And that's why they come to see us, because they want solutions. But actually, half of what happens in that process of change work, and the client doesn't necessarily realize this, and sometimes is not even actually in the position of being ready for change. Do you ever notice that? Sometimes a client comes to work with you, but then you get a quarter of the way through the process and you think, oh, I really don't know if this client's ready for this. You can see it when you start to question them about their income and their outgoings, for example, and you start to see that they're very negative about even giving you information, or they give you information, you know that it's not the full picture, right? And that actually demonstrates from a behavioural perspective that they're perhaps not ready for that change work. And getting a client's permission for change work is a really important part of the process, because if they're not ready, then we can't force them to be ready. That it has to come from their own decision making. So some really interesting points there. In terms of, from a financial advisor perspective, I think that if we can get the client into a position where they're ready for that change, and we can give them the tools that they need to create that change for themselves and bring some awareness to what's going on for them subconsciously, then not only does it make it more powerful, you know, empowering them to make decisions, but it also means that we make a much more valuable service, and it makes the work that we do much more meaningful. And you know, essentially, we want to anchor the plan that we're creating for them, anchor it to those powerful emotions, anchor it to the powerful values, anchor it to the powerful moments that they're wanting to create in their life, that the ones that actually matter for the client. And I don't know about you, but those are the most meaningful client meetings, when they can walk away from that meeting and they've created that change, and you've just really kind of assisted in steering them in the right direction, giving them tools through things like cash flow forecasting to actually show them how that works. But also in financial services, we are very driven to use the logical side of our brain. And we're going to come on to talk about how the brain actually works in a moment. Because from a financial perspective, you know, we're very used to looking at illustrations, looking at stock market graphs, looking at fact finds, you know, factual information, which is all analytical, it's all left side of the brain. But we need to be able to actually switch both sides of the brain on in order to get the most effective, meaningful change, but also to make sure that we're not discounting somebody out of that participation in the meeting. And typically women tend to be more right brain centered in their decision-making process. Not always, but more often than men, which means that if we've got a couple in a financial planning relationship, we need to be able to engage both parties during that conversation. Okay, so the reason this is so important is because this is how change work happens. This is how change work happens. So we're wanting to try and unlock some of these negative patterns of beliefs and behaviors that may actually be preventing our clients from making those changes that we know that they need to make. And working through those thoughts and beliefs and emotions to bring awareness to those. And I want you to write that word awareness down, because for me, a lot of financial planners get very worried about, well, I can see the client needs to make some change, but I don't know how to do it. How do I help them to do it? And the most powerful way, I believe, in the work that I've seen, that I've been helping clients with over the last 3.5 years in pure coaching, is through conscious awareness. Conscious awareness of what those subconscious beliefs are that they've probably never even thought of. They perhaps don't even know that they exist until we start to have some really meaningful conversations with them about it. And this is how it works. So the thoughts that we have then infer how we feel. And then how we feel drives our behavior. So if you think about an example, maybe in your own life where you've thought about something, and it may be a negative thought, like, I can't get out of bed today because I'm just so tired. So that thought drives how you feel. The feeling is, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm depressed, I can't get out of bed, it's dark outside. And our brain just looks for further evidence to support that belief. And so that infers the emotion that we feel. And then it's how we feel that drives how we behave, isn't it? Because if we're not motivated and we're feeling down and we're tired, then that's going to stop us potentially from getting out of bed and opening up the curtains and changing the way that we feel. So it has to start with the thought process. And often financial services always focuses us on the solutions. You know, all the exams and things that we've done, not all of them, but many of them focus on the technical solutions, which we do need to know in order to create the solution part of the client journey. But for me, it's not where it starts. And I'm going to talk you through the 3 steps around financial past, financial present, and financial future, which I believe is the key really to unlocking more meaningful conversations, but also to help clients make this change happen. And this for me is at the core of what financial coaching is all about. So we're going to go into a breakout exercise in a moment, but I just want to share with you a very simple diagram about how the brain actually works. So as humans, we naturally seek the path of least resistance because our brains dislike anything overcomplicated. You know, it's always looking for evidence to support what it already knows. Now, how does the brain know what it knows? The brain knows what it knows through our experiences, through our knowledge, through our thoughts, through influences, society influences, friendship groups, peer groups, what our parents said or didn't say growing up about not just money, but lots of different things. So that the brain is sapping in all of that information. And there's different parts of the brain that store different parts of information. But powerful questions that we're using in a financial coaching meeting invite the client to explore their own thinking in a much more deep and meaningful way. So when you look at this diagram here, what's interesting for me is that when we think of the left-hand side, depending on, I'm not sure which side of my screen to point on, this side, I think. But when we think about the left-hand side of the brain, it's all about systems and order. It comes from a very logical perspective, very factual. It's very analytical, very linear, can be considered quite aggressive. So if you look at the research around men and women, there is evidence to show that men use more of the left-hand side part of their brain more than women, which can be seen as the more aggressive part of the brain in comparison to the right-hand side of the brain, which is more emotional. But equally, there's lots of evidence to show that it isn't a gender thing, Sometimes men can be very right brain centered, so they have more of a preference to using the right hand side of their brain. They can be more emotional, they can be more sensitive. So it's not necessarily a gender thing, but it's described as kind of the yin and the yang. For those of you that are, you know, all into the to yin and yang, the right hand side of the brain is described as the yin, and the left hand side is described as the yang. But you can actually see this play out in personality types as well, can't you? Many of you will be looking at this thinking, yeah, I'm really logical, I'm great at the technical aspects of my job, I like looking at graphs and data. And the rest of you will be like, oh my God, that's the stuff I hate in my job, and I'll try and outsource that as quickly as possible. And neither is right and neither is wrong. But we do use both sides of the brain. All of us use both sides of the brain. We just have a preference of one over the other. And there's lots and lots of really interesting books that I can recommend if you're interested in reading more about this subject. But the right-hand side of the brain is more passive, it's more creative. Lots of artists use more of the right-hand side of their brain. And I hear one of you, I think, in the group here is an artist in your spare time. So that potentially shows me that you are using more of the right-hand side of your brain. Very imaginative, very intuitive. The decisions that you make often come from feeling and emotion. How many of you feel like that? You make your decisions more by what you feel than logic. It's like the heart and the head, isn't it? Do you make decisions from the heart, or do you make decisions from the head? Neither is right and neither is wrong. But potentially, if you make decisions from the heart based on feeling and intuition, you're likely to be more right-hand brained than left-hand brained. Do any of you remember the picture that came out of that dress that was, it was like, is it a gold dress or a blue dress? Do any of you remember that? Let me know in the comments if you've seen that. If you haven't, I'll share it with you on another occasion. But it was fascinating because it was like, there's so many people say it's definitely gold. How can it be blue? And then there's a whole bunch of other people going, no, it's definitely blue. It's not gold. And it's just because of the way that the brain, from a neuro level, has actually taken that image and is then translating what they see through different parts of the brain. So it's really, really interesting. There's lots and lots of research and games and evidence to show this. But what I want you to get you to think about is, if we know that we need to be actively working both sides of the brain in order to get a client interested in talking about finances, Rajesh is saying, I couldn't see either colour due to colour blindness. So what colour did you actually see then, Rajesh? What colour did you actually see? Let us know in the comments. Simon, yes, and I have seen both colours strangely at different times of the day. Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, green. Okay. Really interesting. Really interesting. So if you've got a partner that wears a gold dress, do you see that as green then, Rajesh? It's so interesting, isn't it? It's so interesting. So what I want you to think about now in your breakout groups, let me just go down a slide here, is I want you just to get you thinking about how could we engage more of the right-hand side of our clients' brains. So what do you think could help? What could we do as financial professionals to engage the right-hand side of the client's brain? So thinking about these descriptions here, how can we demonstrate that through creativity, imagination, intuition, feelings and emotion, holistic thinking, possibility rather than perhaps more aggressive way of thinking, perhaps more open-minded rather than closed-minded, or growth mindset, for example. Scott's just messaged me about the dress. Yeah, I will share that with you. And actually, what I was going to ask you at the end of today is, I was wondering whether it would be useful actually to set up some kind of WhatsApp group or something, so that if you guys have got any questions in between our sessions, we've got somewhere to kind of share links or ask questions, or, you know, just in case someone can't get onto a Zoom link or something like that. So have a little think about that actually this afternoon, and let me know at the end, and we can share the images in the WhatsApp group. So I'm going to get you to go into some breakout rooms. Marcus is on the ready to split you back into your groups. And how long shall we have for this? Shall we have, there's 4 of you in the group, isn't there? So we'll give you sort of 8 to 10 minutes on this exercise, so a couple of minutes each. And I'd like you just to think about what could we do? What kind of exercises or questions or things could we start to think about to really help to engage the right-hand side of our clients' brains? So off you go. I'll let Marcus pop you into your groups, and we'll give you a 1-minute countdown towards the end as well. Has anyone got any questions before they go, actually? I think possibly you've all gone into your breakout rooms now, but if you've got any questions, just let me know in the chat box. Hey, and we're back. Sorry, I had a really weird warning message on my computer. I was thinking, no, it's going to crash on me. So before I share my screen back again, what came out of perhaps could we perhaps select one person from each group to share one or two things and ideas that came up for you in that discussion? Let me just 1 second. Yeah, fantastic, Julie. So in fact, Julie, would you like to go first? Would you like to share something from your group? That's very unfair of me, isn't it, to put you on the spot?
Yeah, that's okay. There was really good stuff that came out of the chat. So Scott starts with what was money like for you growing up, and he takes them back. So what it was like in previous relationships or in previous jobs or as a family, and I think I really like that. I think, is it Jess? Jess, I'm hoping Jess is going to share something with me. In advance of a meeting, she sends out a list of 10 questions along with the usual stuff. And I think you were saying you'll get kind of the monosyllabic answers to some of it, but then there's the more probing questions. And I like how that positions it, that we're not just about numbers. That's not really what we're going to do. And I think Kate's got a good line, which is, tell me your story. I've come in halfway through the film.
Oh, that's a good one. Not heard that before.
Me, I just take people out for cake. So yeah. I will tend to do introductory meetings over cake and coffee.
Oh, I want to come to one of your introductory meetings.
And then we graduate to lunch and wine. So
amazing.
That's what came out of the group.
Wonderful. I love how you're playing to their stomach as well as their right brain with that then. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing those. And I love the idea of sending out questions in advance of the meeting, because this is quite interesting in itself, actually. Sometimes it depends on the client, but sometimes I find sending questions in advance of the meeting, as you just described, really gets them ready, that you're not just there to talk to them about numbers. You're there to create the meaningful change. And what impact does that have? What impact does that have for you as a financial professional? But what impact does it also have on the clients? It just opens out that whole opportunity, doesn't it, to have more meaningful conversations. And like you say, it puts the ball back in the client's court. We're not forcing them to fill out questionnaires when they're with us. And we're going to come on to talk about how our own biases can actually have an impact on clients without us even being consciously aware of them. Hiran has nominated Gretchen from our group.
Of course he has, of course.
Of course he has.
Okay, so interestingly, we didn't talk about anything about what we currently really do, because I think we probably all have different things. A lot of our focus is like how we might I guess think about things that a right-hand brained person who naturally uses that right hand brain, things that might get them thinking more in a different way. So we talked a little bit about different exercises. Danielle mentioned something about, you might want to introduce some kind of breathing exercise to kind of focus the mind a little bit, like we were doing the sausage. I like the sausage fingers, by the way. That will be the one that I use. It's completely random, but it kind of like forces them out of their comfort zone. But also I think there's a piece to be done, especially if you're trying to run a traditional financial planning firm. how that's introduced, because if you're like me and you don't want a coaching firm, how are you going to integrate that into a financial planning firm without developing like a whole new stream of stuff? So it's kind of as our exercise as planners to how quickly can we recognize the left and right hand brain? How do we introduce it to the mix, and move away from that? I've also heard someone, I'm pretty sure it's a life planner, it's her name Haley, talks about drawing your plan for me. So draw your story, or draw things that make you tick, rather than, and or maybe things you're scared of, rather than explaining them. But of course, we've got a bit of a piece to do about moving our clients who came to talk about pension to a discovery meeting, which is drawing. So we probably need to, I think it's just about, it'll be okay if you introduced it and said why I'm doing this. This is just bear with me for 20 minutes, focus on this. So I think that's where we sat. And I think a lot about drawing out those feelings and emotions around money, recognizing quickly where there's conflicts with couples was one thing we talked about, so that you don't get into separate plans or separate discussions. But also I said that I don't want to be a marriage counsellor, so how am I going to I don't want to be a therapist, so how am I going to, you know. So we all felt quite strongly about that. We're all different stages of our business, so Simon, you know, might be happy to have a different wing to his firm, or so I think, yeah, we're all coming from slightly different angles.
Yeah, great. So many, like I've just written 3 things down straight away from there, 3, like lots of golden nuggets in there. I think whether you have it as a separate business or you integrate it into your existing business is kind of irrelevant. I think that's just varying on what's going to work for you in your business. I have them separately, but equally it could work in an existing regulated practice. This is why this program is specifically developed for those of you who are regulated, because it is different. It is different thinking about, well, what happens if I don't want to set up a separate business? How do I integrate it? And how do I get the client ready to have those conversations without, you know, without kind of suddenly landing them on a, right, get your paintbrushes out. We're going to paint your vision and your plan. The lady's video that I think you were referring to there, Gretchen, is a lady called Patty, and I can't never pronounce her surname, Dubrovnik or something. It's a YouTube video, which I can share with you in the WhatsApp group. And she talks about how you could, one of the exercises you can do if you know your client is right brains and they're creative, and you know that they'll be creative just in their language when you have that discovery call with them. The language that creative people use are, I see this, I can feel this, or I can see this. They use very, you've got kinesthetic, people that are very kinesthetic, and people that are very visual, people that are very I can't even think of the word, audible, I think it is. There's different types of way that we learn. So you could do a personality quiz with them. You could share a video with them in advance of the meeting. You could have a discovery call with them and just really actively listen to the words that they're using to understand whether they're right-brained or left-brained. You might just send them a YouTube video about the red dress and ask them, did you see it as gold or did you see it as blue? You know, I think clients would actually really enjoy some element of fun and something that's different to what they may be expecting from a financial advisor conversation. That's what will make you stand out. But one of the things you also mentioned there, Gretchen, is about permission, because the client does have to be ready to receive that kind of help. And one of the ways that I do that is by asking them a bunch of really open questions on that discovery call. And I'll kind of talk through with them, depending whether they're visual or not. I might share my screen with them, I might talk them through a scenario, or I might just listen to their language and think, actually, no, you're talking to me about seeing and hearing and feeling. In which case I know that if I start talking about, well, I'm going to ask you to very creatively draw out your vision and your purpose and your life goals. Instantly you can hear in their voice whether that's going to turn them on or not. So sometimes it is a case of testing and trialing. But one of the other things you talked about, Gretchen, which we are going to cover later in this program, is what do you do for financial conflicts when you're dealing with couples? I've got a 6-step process that I use with couples and I'm not a marriage counsellor, just to really help them to nurture that relationship. Because often there's lots of evidence to show that men in a relationship, we're often attracted to people with the opposite relationship to money with us. How interesting is that? But how destroying can that also be? Because actually, if we're attracted to somebody who has an opposite belief, then that is going to cause potential conflict. So one of the exercises that we're going to do at the end of today's session, where we're going to start to explore some of your own subconscious beliefs, is something that you can then start to use with your client work and with your partners, potentially, if you are in a relationship right now. But we will cover more around financial conflict in couples later in the program as well. I think it's a really important area. So thank you for sharing your group, Gretchen. Who's with the other two groups we've got left? I don't know who was in which groups, but would somebody like to unmute themselves? Oh, Nyla from group 4. Nyla, would you like to unmute yourself and share what you came up with in your group?
Hey, Catherine. It's Neela. I just thought I'd correct you there.
Oh, sorry, Neela.
That's okay. That's no problem. Yeah, I think we were all on the same page. Jenny was talking about opening up the conversation with lots of open-ended questions to start with, and Raj made a couple of really good points about just being able to give that client time and space to talk, that they actually do want to be sort of seen and heard. You know, we all live really busy lives, and you know, and something I said is that, you know, with busy lives, people have their sort of their actions and to-do list to one side, so they never really get a chance to think about what those things mean to them. And so when they do come to you and they want to sort out their pensions or their, you know, life assurances, they actually are not thinking about what that really means. So it's about sort of just giving them that, you know, that lovely container to feel safe, and that they can and be comfortable. And something that Raj said, that what helps him open up the conversation and is about letting the clients or just asking them their first and earliest memories about money, so that they know where they're, so he gets a gauge of where the clients are at when they first come in. So yeah, so those are the kind of generic things that came up in our conversations.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. Thank you for sharing those. It's such a lovely question, isn't it? I wonder how many instances has that client ever had that opportunity to really think about what was their earliest memory of money? Such a great question, really open question. It's actually a really nice question to have with a friend or a partner. And actually, I'm going to get you to do some of that work after week 3. Because no one ever asks us, and if we don't ask these questions, who else is going to ask the client these kind of questions? So yeah, lovely question there. Thank you very much for sharing. And group 1 members, I think you guys are left, so that's Catherine, Charlie, Damien and Peter. Who's going to volunteer themselves as spokesperson for this session? I'll let you unmute yourself.
I think as nobody else unmuted themselves, that's
Thank you, Catherine.
I think perhaps we found it a little bit difficult to begin with, and part of the reason why is that we felt, because we did, some of us haven't done it with ourselves, how do we then approach that with a client? I think a couple of the suggestions were, so when we have a standard question that we've all asked our clients is, what are your plans with retirement? Is to then peel it down another layer to how might retirement feel. You tend to get blockages. They don't want to talk about something, or they can't visualize it. So sort of tapping into how they might feel. Second example that I find useful is with inheritance tax. If you say you get an inheritance, you immediately get a block. They don't want to think about that. They don't want to feel that. But by imagining somebody else in the family, so will your children benefit from, and you get a very different conversation, and then you can sort of come back to them. So sometimes I think maybe circumnavigating it rather than being so direct. And then really it was more about, we talked actually about your personality test, whether we were reflectors or pragmatic or theorists, and I forget what the fourth one was, and how what we're bringing to that, and by us being more able and open, that from there we might be. So we did have many great ideas to begin with, but it certainly set off some thoughts.
Yeah, some great things in there. And that's one of the reasons why I got you to do that assessment. And I debated about whether to do personality quizzes and things like that. But, some of you will be activists, theorists, pragmatists, reflectors. And you'll know in your groups alone who are the activists, because they'll be the ones that will want to talk first. They want to get their communication out first. Whereas for some of you that are reflectors, you'll go away after each of the weeks. And that's when the learning will happen. It will happen afterwards during that reflection period. And that's one of the reasons why the homework that we're setting, homework in inverted commas, is going to be different each time, because I want to be able to, to match in with all of your different styles and learning styles. But one of the things you said that was really important there in your group, Catherine, was about the feeling question. How would it feel rather than what do you want to do? Because sometimes the do question is about action, isn't it? And what you're going to do. Well, actually, I don't really know what to do. That's why I've come to see you. But how would you want to feel is a really nice way of opening up that conversation. And a perfect example of opening up the right-hand side of the brain. How would you feel? And it may involve in their language about being creative. And some clients come into the meeting, they've already got their notepad and pencil out. That may be because they're quite visual and they just have, and I'm the same. I have to write things down. I have to draw pictures. It's just the way that my brain works. It's the preference that I have in the way that my brain works. But the other thing that you mentioned is that particularly with inheritances, and particularly also with things like divorce, when you've got trauma involved, then people do not want to talk about it. And they particularly don't want to talk about it with a financial professional, because they feel judged. And judgment and fear and greed and shame and all of these negative emotions, which we're going to explore in a lot more detail next week, or in 2 weeks' time, is this can have a huge impact on how clients feel and behave. And particularly with inheritances and divorce, because they're holding on subconscious beliefs, but they're also holding on to trauma. Now, we're not financial therapists, so we're not expected to help them heal. But actually, by doing some of these exercises, which we're going to experience shortly, this may bring up some trauma for them. It may bring up some emotion, and that's okay. And it's actually part of the healing process in itself, is to be aware of what some of that trauma may be and how it's impacting on their thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. But a little point to kind of mention, one of the tools I'm going to introduce you to in a few weeks' time is an online quiz that you can use. And I've got some free access codes that you guys can play around with for that particular tool. It's not my own tool, it's one that I use, an American tool. But one of the bits of research that psychologist has actually discovered is that often people who have a very spontaneous, impulsive relationship with money, 80% of the time have some kind of trauma in their background. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be significant trauma. Often when we think of trauma, it can be, abuse or, terrible, terrible things. It's not always significant trauma. The word trauma actually comes from overwhelm. So right now, everybody is in trauma mindset because of COVID-19, because of the fact that we are being thrown into a very unforeseen situation. So when we get into overwhelm, how many times have you guys felt in overwhelm in the last few weeks? Probably more in the last few weeks than you have done for a fair while. Now, overwhelm is trauma. And what the brain does is the way that it deals with trauma is it goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And when it goes into freeze mode, that actually then can lead to PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. You may have heard of that term before. And financial PTSD is a psychological term where we go into freeze mode, we lock down, and then that can cause us to go into PTSD. Actually, there's lots of evidence to show that when we take action, if we're in that trauma state, it can actually prevent us from going into freeze and prevent us from going into PTSD. Now, how is that even relevant to financial planning or financial advice? It's not relevant in terms of you don't need to fix the client, but actually being aware of some of those beliefs and traumas that they may or may not want to talk about with you. But that's the key. They don't have to talk to you about it in order to create that change. But by bringing awareness to some of the exercises that they may in their own time, in the comfort of their own home, bring up some of those subconscious beliefs, that will help them to create the change work, not us. So sometimes we have to recognize that we don't have to be the solution providers to all of this change work. So thank you for sharing those. There's some lovely things that have come in there. I'm just going to share my screen back again to the next slide. Oh, I've got a weird message that's come up on my screen. One second. Okay, can you all see my screen again? Just give me a thumbs up in the... Brilliant, thank you, that's great. Okay, so as many of you have come up with in your discussion groups, these are some of the examples of exercises that we can be using in our client meetings to start complementing some of the things that we naturally already do. So naturally, for those of you that are using cash flow forecasting, or even just fact finding, if you're doing mortgages, for example, you're fact finding through looking at their income and their outgoings. You may be using calculators in your client meetings, protection calculators, for example, or investment calculators. And some of you may even be using games in your client meetings. But that's very much more left-hand side of the brain. It's very much more based on logic and analytics. And as you've just beautifully demonstrated in your breakout groups, using reflection-based questions, whether they're pre-meeting or post-meeting, is a really wonderful way of helping and nurturing the client to use more of the right-hand side of their brain. I love the idea of potentially starting the meeting with a kind of breathing exercise. Perhaps we could try one of that on our sessions and see what impact that has for you guys without getting told off by Alexa for copyright. Maybe you might have to play your own music in the background, but that can just get the client ready and prepared and in that state of learning and also in that state of reflection. The other thing you could do is maybe have some audio tracks that you can download off the internet. You can find from hypnosis coaches, for example. You could maybe approach a hypnosis coach, for example, and ask them to record a special audio for you, for example, that could then be sent to the client in advance of the meeting, or could be sent to them after the meeting. I know many of you with your risk questionnaire, for example, don't necessarily get the client to complete it when they're with you. You might send it to them in advance of the meeting or after the meeting. And again, that could be sent with a nice audio for them to play, perhaps while they're listening to that or completing the risk questionnaire, for example. Videos is another great way to engage the client's right-hand side of the brain. And maybe we could talk through some examples of videos over the course of the program to see what examples of videos we could find or create for ourselves. And quotes is another one. So how many of you are on Instagram, and how many of you often see quotes in your feed and you read them and you're like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that quotes is another way of actually engaging the right-hand side of the brain. So you could, in your financial planning reports, for example, you could have a page in between the recommendations, for example, that could just be a nice quote. Or you could send them a quote before they come in, or something to inspire them, or a quote on the top of your letterhead, for example. There's lots of imaginative, creative ways that you could use quotes in your client meetings as well. Okay, so I just very briefly, we're going to talk about this throughout the whole of the program actually, but I just very briefly just want to reconfirm really that asking questions about the client's past, present and future is an effective tool to really strengthen that emotional connection. That's what we're looking to do here. We're looking to really strengthen that emotional connection with clients. And a lot of financial advisors get fearful of this financial past concept because they think, well, I don't want to be a therapist. I'm not a therapist. And you don't need to be a therapist to have those conversations with clients. One of the things, I am actually currently studying financial therapy, but that's because I find it fascinating. And I will probably at some point offer that as an additional service with my client work. I know it's an area in the US particularly. They have financial coaches, financial therapists and financial planners. We don't really have that in the UK at the moment. So that's definitely an area that I think could be explored more. But this is just really about understanding the client's internal dialogue and external dialogue. What they're saying to you externally is being driven by their internal dialogue. And we just want to bring some curiosity and awareness, just very, very gently, into what is that internal dialogue. And then we move them fairly quickly from financial past into present. You know, how are they feeling at the moment? What are their internal feelings about money? How do you feel about money right now? Is a really great question. Another great question, actually, to bring them back into the present is, you know, if we were sitting at the end of this meeting, financial future, what would you be saying about that meeting? What would you be saying about the outcomes that we've achieved together during that process or during that relationship? It's a really great question to open with, I think, on a discovery call, potentially. You know, how do you know when we finish working together? How would you feel? What would you be doing differently? What would you have in place that you don't have in place at the moment? And it just opens up that opportunity and possibility, which is where we talk about financial future. So it's the internal possibilities. What does the client feel is possible for them? Because that's where motivation comes from, isn't it? It's possibility. Self-motivation is often the key to anchoring financial goals. We've got to anchor that into something that's motivating enough for us to think that it's possible, and B, that we can actually achieve it in the first place. So we're going to come back regularly actually to this particular slide, but I just want to share that with you, that this is about us kind of gently gliding through past, present and future in the work that we're doing with our clients. Okay, so we're going to come on to another exercise, and I want to kind of shift this conversation from physically how the brain works to our own core beliefs around money. Now, the download document that I'm going to send out to you tomorrow night is going to go through a money beliefs exercise in quite some detail. And even if some of you have done this exercise before, it's a really great one to reflect on a regular basis. And for those of you that have never done it before, it's a really gentle way of introducing you to what we call a self-limiting beliefs exercise. But for the purposes of today, I just want to give you a couple of minutes actually before you go into the breakout rooms, just to have 2 minutes of quietness for yourself to think about this one question. And that one question is, what was your earliest memory of money? Now, if you struggle with this and you can't think back to the actual memory, see whether you can come up with anything around what did you hear about money, or how did you feel about money growing up? So if you're struggling with the actual physical memory, see how far back you can go as to what was your earliest memory of money. And actually, when you start talking about it, you may actually find it will trigger something else as a memory there for you. And then what I want to do here is I want to give you, let me just do a quick time check. So I'd like to give you 10 minutes for this exercise. So you've not really got that long for each person in the group. So literally only a minute or two per person. So try and keep your description fairly brief. But what I would like everybody else in that group to do is to switch on your active listening. And when I say active listening, that means not saying anything. And actually, I'll probably encourage you to mute yourself on your microphone. Put your pens down and just really trigger this active listening. We're going to talk more about active listening skills later in the program. But really think about giving your full attention to that person. And I want you to listen out to the words and the language, so the words, the language that person is using in their description, and see if you can pick out any feelings or emotions in the person's memory that they're sharing. And then we're going to share some of that when you come back into the meeting room. Okay, has anyone got any questions about this exercise before we start? Let's have a quick look in the chat box. Okay, that's great. So Marcus is going to pop you into your breakout rooms again. So you've got 10 minutes. So if you just take, I would say, 1 minute each, and we'll perhaps try and do a little timer on the screen for you, so that you know when your 1 minute's coming or 1 minute's finished, and we'll encourage you to switch to the next person. That will just leave you with an extra 2 minutes at the end, and then come back into the main room. Okay, I'll see you in a few minutes. Hi guys. Let's just wait for everyone to come back in. It's a really strange feeling, by the way, sitting in the main room and it's completely silent. I feel like I'm missing out on some very interesting conversations. I might actually change my mind for the next session and end up coming into one of your groups. I suspect that was probably one of the most interesting breakout rooms we've had so far, and you probably wanted more time, right? Because it's really interesting to explore people's relationships and early memories around money. What did you hear and what did you notice in your groups? Let's spend sort of 5 to 10 minutes on just talking about what did you hear and what did you notice. So perhaps if we could have one person from each group again, that would be wonderful, and perhaps a different person this time would be lovely. So who's going to go first? Neela's nominated Jenny. And Catherine's nominated Charlie. This is great. So Jenny, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Good. So it was the most interesting conversation we've had so far. You were right about that, Catherine. And it's quite funny how quickly the conversation becomes quite emotional, actually, when you ask quite a big question like that. Some of us did have some specific first memories of money, and some of us didn't. And I think we all probably agreed on the whole that it was more feelings that you remember, especially if your memory is from when you were quite a young child, then you don't necessarily understand what you were feeling at the time when you were feeling it. But now when you look back on it and you can put context around it, you kind of understand it a bit more or can explain it a bit more. But at the time it was just like a feeling or something that was going on in the family that you were picking up on.
And was there any particular type of emotion or any particular words that you picked out when you were switching on your active listening?
I think just, people do describe how a feeling maybe more than the specific thing that was happening at the time. It was more like a build-up of like maybe a pattern of behavior, like from parents or the rest of the household. Specific things that came up were, well, for me, I know I used the word mystery about 5 times. So everyone probably picked up on that from me. And then not so much a struggle. That I don't think that came up necessarily in the stories. But it was all very much like rooted in like a family experience of money, and how parents coped and behaved around money is reflected in what we were all saying about our experience and memories.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. And that's exactly how our subconscious beliefs are formed. Before the age of 7, our brain hasn't actually developed the cognitive capacity to be able, sorry, I think my mic's playing up a bit. It hasn't even developed the cognitive behavior or functionality to even be able to think for ourselves. And so what happens is that and you'll see this if you've got children yourself, before the age of around 6 or 7, they do everything you tell them to do, or they believe, not to say do everything that you tell them to do, but they believe everything that you tell them. They just take it as true. It's a truth. But when they get to the age of 8 or 9, you start the rational part of their brain starts to develop, and that's when they start to develop their own cognitive functioning. And then suddenly, when they start to question things like, so why does that work like that, or why does that happen? So it is, if you think about it, a lot of the messages we hear about money are actually beliefs that our brain has taken as truths from the age of 6 and 7. But not only that, there's lots of evidence to show that it's generational beliefs that are actually passed through. So those beliefs that have come from your parents have come from their parents. And those beliefs that your grandparents held came from their parents. Not solely their parents, but a large proportion of what their beliefs are, not just around money, come from the heredited belief pattern. There's an amazing book I've just finished reading recently called It Didn't Start With You. I don't know whether I've got it. Yeah, in fact, I've got it here. I'd really recommend that you read it. It's by Mark Wolynn, which is Wollyn. It looks like that. It's got a picture of two faces on the front. You can see my snazzy little bookmarks through the book. But this talks exactly about how inherited family trauma shapes who you are and how you go about ending that cycle, that pattern. And the way that you end that cycle or pattern is by just bringing consciousness awareness to it. And that's all we're expecting to do in those client meetings. We're not going in and we're not trying to fix trauma. We're not trying to come up with solutions. We're just trying to bring some gentle awareness to that by asking that question: what was your earliest memory of money? Thank you very much, Jenny. So that's the first group. So someone from the second group, I think somebody's already been nominated. Jess, I think. Oh no, Charlie, sorry. Charlie, you've been nominated from your group. Let's find you on my screen. Yep, Charlie, are you happy to share?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think you know, we had a very similar experience of, I think, talking about our childhoods and the family's relationship with money, you know, and how our parents talked about it. And I think the phrase that we all agreed that we'd heard many times was "money doesn't grow on trees." I think listening to people and listening to what we were talking about, you know, scarcity and words around scarcity came up quite a lot. And I think there was very much this element that your entitlement to money is related to how hard you work. You know, there was some interesting, you know, words that we all use, words like fortunate, and, you know, fortune's not just about sort of, you know, the material wealth we build, but some, you know, fortune, its actual definitions about luck and, you know, chance, and, you know, you are where you are. And of course, we know now as financial planners that, you know, you don't necessarily have to physically earn money. You can make money by, you know, making good decisions, by using tax, you know, advantages, by investing. So yeah, it's interesting. But I think all of us shared, although I think, you know, we might come from sort of different places and different backgrounds, all of us shared that fear that money might disappear, or that, you know, we have to work hard to get it, and that's the only way it comes.
Yeah. Oh goodness, there's so many pearls of wisdom in that share there, Charlie. Thank you. And you're right. There's actually 3 stages of enoughness. There's not enoughness, just about enoughness, and then more than enoughness. And that I think that's really interesting to think about. Is your client operating from a scarcity mindset? Because scarcity is about not having enough. And what is it that keeps them in that scarcity mindset? It's their experiences, those beliefs, those subconscious beliefs that they may not even aware of. One of the exercises we're going to do in I think it's week 3, it may be week 5, is about your financial comfort zone. And this was an exercise that was developed by a gentleman called Brad Klontz, who's a financial psychologist in the US. And what he said is that we each have our own financial comfort zone. And financial scarcity, for example, is our comfort zone. It's like an elastic band. So when we try and stretch that comfort zone, and you just used an amazing example, Charlie, of when we say to a client, oh, but we can save you tax so you don't have to make your money work as hard. The client, if they're in scarcity mindset, will think, what? Is that possible or not possible? They're likely to resist it, because if they're in scarcity mindset, they're like, well, you're telling me that I don't have to work hard for money. But there's like a legitimate way of saving tax. They won't believe it's true because of those subconscious beliefs. Can you see the relation there? That's a really powerful example. So it's about just having that conversation with the client about, you know, how do we move them from scarcity mindset? And the financial comfort zone exercise that we'll do later in the program will really help. If you can identify there that they are in scarcity mindset because of some of those subconscious beliefs, that's going to be really, really powerful. Really powerful. Thank you, Charlie. Jess, I think you've been nominated next. You're all going to want to change groups by the end of this, aren't you?
I tried so hard to nominate Kate.
Get her back, don't worry.
So we had quite a mixed bag of early memories. A couple good, a couple not, but they did come back again to how you feel about it and how it makes you feel, and worth and self-worth. We do behaviours and things that we do can be linked right back to, you know, God, what your dad told you when you were 3 or whatever, or your grandpa, or yeah. But just very much about the emotional link of money and where you were in a situation as a child.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. So just sort of reaffirming then is that, and because it is that emotion that's going back to that original diagram, it's the emotion that drives the behavior, isn't it? But what drives the emotion is the thoughts, the subconscious beliefs. So if we bring awareness to those subconscious beliefs, we've actually got a possibility of creating change to that emotion of how they feel. Some of you may have come across therapy like EFT or tapping, rapid transformational therapy. There's lots of different techniques that actually take people back to that moment and actually change the way that the brain is perceived, or the meaning that we've attached to that memory. And that's something worth writing down, actually, because to be aware of every one of us, when you do this exercise in your homework as well, every one of you will attach a specific meaning to every single experience that you've ever had. So if that meaning is negative, actually we can change that experience by just changing the meaning that we've attached to it. That's really powerful. We can't change what's happened, of course, but we can change the meaning that we attach to that experience. So thank you very much, Jess. And then the final group, who's been nominated? Is it Simon? Is it Simon that's been nominated for the last? It was.
Yeah, thanks. I thought that was really interesting. I think the key thing I got from that was how far back that memory can actually go. You know, when you first mentioned it, I was thinking, 18, I remember going out and buying my first car. And then people start talking about memories way before being 18. But I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I've got a 10-year-old and 4-year-old here. And it's certainly that one thing I'll take from that is how I talk about money around the house in front of them, and sort of the reaction I have to money in front of them. And I think the other thing that was pulled from it is just how emotional that subject can actually be, and how that memory can drive sort of behaviours moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And gosh, if only someone gave us a rule book of how to talk to kids about money. Like it's it's one of my favorite topics, actually. But you're absolutely right. We have to be a little bit careful about what we say in front of children at that age, because how often do we hear ourselves when the kids are, we're dragging the kids around the shops and they're like, I want that and I want that, particularly when they're very little. And our natural reaction is to say, well, no, we can't afford that at the moment, or we can't have that right now. Then that puts them into scarcity. It's like, well, you can't have it, as opposed to perhaps, well, if you want that new game, you've got to save for it. And one of the things that me and my boys do regularly is once a month we have a money date, and we have a little magic chart, and we put money into pots, and we talk about spending, investing, giving and saving. And then they have a needs and a wants list, and they pick something off their wants list, and we talk about a little plan. So my son's just sold 2 of his old bikes this week to get himself £40 to go and buy himself a football t-shirt. So it's little things like that we can, even though we may not be able to afford it because we've allocated the money somewhere else, it's the language that we're using that's really important. So, but gosh, if only we had a rule book of this is how you should teach kids about money. So really interesting. Thanks very much, Simon. And do we have any, is that it? Have we done all the groups? Hold on, let me just come back to my main screen. Yes, perfect. Thank you, Marcus. Okay, wonderful. Let me share my screen again. Okay, great. So let's just do a quick time check. If we run out of time, by the way, guys, in any of the things that I've prepared, there may be weeks where it takes longer for us to have conversations, and rather than actually reducing those conversations down, I think it's really important to have that time. We'll just do a bonus session or something at the end, if that's okay with you guys. If we run out of time, we'll just do an extra session. So actually, one of the things that Charlie was talking about, there's some of the common money beliefs about, like, money doesn't grow on trees, for example. And I've actually listed out a few of the most common beliefs that I've come across in my work with clients. So things like more money will make you will make things happy, or more money will make you happy. This constant desire to have more and more and more, and that's being driven from a place of not enoughness. And that could be driven from a place of, because money wasn't freely available growing up. Perhaps you came from an environment where it was poverty or a poor financial background. Then that could infer the belief that, well, I don't ever want to have that kind of life again, and therefore I do need to create more and more and more. Another very common belief is it's better to give than to receive. And this can be very prevalent in giving professions, for example. So therapists work, or coaches, even financial planners actually, where they do their job because they like to help others. But that belief, therefore, is it's better to give than to receive. And therefore, because really money is just an exchange of giving and receiving, and being able to freely accept as well as being able to freely give. And that's really all that money is. Money is just a tool to enable that exchange of value to happen. Scott, I can see you're in deep thoughts there. Live for today is another one. Oh, live for today, let's just, I'm not going to worry about the future. I'm just going to live for the day. And again, that can come from lots and lots of different examples and experiences that person may have be keeping in their subconscious belief system. It could actually be also related to trauma in terms of loss of a significant person in their life. Often that is related to loss of a loved one. Well, my husband died when he was 40, therefore I'm going to live for today. So that's a common one that crops up, particularly in inheritance conversations. I had a client actually I worked with whose grandmother passed away, and she had a check, and it was for about £20,000. And it took me 6 weeks of working with her to actually get her to pay the check into the bank. And the only way that we could actually get her to do it in the end was to take a photograph of the check and put the photograph next to her bed, which is where the check was, and pay the check in. Because her belief was that she feared, because she'd never been good with money, that she would waste that inheritance. And it was really interesting how we really helped work her through that pattern of behavior, so that she then came out of it feeling that she was worthy of money and that she was worthy and good with money. And we'll come on to kind of affirmations and things next time. Rich people are greedy is another big one. Well, I don't want to have significant wealth. I'm not worthy, using that word that came up in your conversations about wealth. Rich people are greedy. Is that actually true? There's probably some examples where it is true. Donald Trump, I know it's a bit controversial for me to say that, but Donald Trump is probably someone I wouldn't say is a particularly nice person, and he's particularly rich. But then equally, I can think of Brené Brown, Oprah Winfrey, lots of other significant people that are rich and are wonderful. But again, it's that subconscious belief that we're potentially holding on to. You have to work hard for money is a really common one. Money doesn't grow on trees. You have to work hard for money. And the way that we see that in client behavior is that they're just on that treadmill. I've got to work harder. It's literally like a physical on that treadmill of work. And when they have to take time out, they feel guilty, because that belief embedded in their subconscious belief system is you have to work hard for it. So if you're not working hard, you're not doing a good job, and you're not deserving to receive money. I don't deserve money is another common one. And you'll see that in the financial comfort zone exercise, actually. And a lot of people who are in debt cycles will suffer with this, because they've been so used to not ever having money and living in debt, that then when they get money, they fight as hard as possible to get back into a place of scarcity, because it's familiar to them. And the brain likes to look for further evidence of familiarity. It doesn't like change. So that's why you see people that are in debt, they consolidate it onto their mortgage, and they get back into that debt cycle within 6 months because that's what's familiar to them. And then money is not important is another one. They're kind of a bit carefree about it. Oh yeah, money's money. It's not really important. You're less likely to probably see clients come into your office that have that kind of belief. Although you may see it in couples. You might see it in couples where the husband or the wife doesn't show up to the meeting because they don't believe that money's that important. So the interesting point here is to think about, first of all, what emotions might be present, but also how, if you're holding on to one of those beliefs yourself, how do you think that will impact on clients' beliefs and values? So if you're holding on to that belief that rich people are greedy, money doesn't grow on trees, you have to work hard for money, and a client comes into your office and starts talking about the polar opposite of that, how do you think that would impact on that dialogue between you and the client? Let me know in the chat box, actually, what are your thoughts around this? How do you think that could impact? And we'll talk more about this next time. Let me just load the chat box up again. I'll just give you a second just to have a think about that. So how may your beliefs around money influence your clients' beliefs? Do you think it would? Do you think it would influence your clients' beliefs potentially? Scott can create judgmentalism. Yeah, absolutely. It is because we all have filters, don't we? Yeah, and as Kate said, actually, it could, because we hear what we're saying through our own filters, friction. One of the biggest breakthroughs I had was realizing I needed to be neutral in the room. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that you can do by getting into that active listening mode. And I'm going to get you to practice that later in the program. How many times do we have conversations? You know, when you have conversations with people, before you've even finished your sentence, someone starts talking. They're not in active listening mode. And often we get into that mode in financial planning meetings or financial advisor meetings. And these are some of the challenges, because we do know that there are gender differences. Women are more risk averse than men, generally. We know that if we only have conscious level discussions, we can't change our subconscious beliefs. Only the client can. And the client will have their own financial comfort zones that they're operating from. So it's what would be great, it's not our duty to do this, but it would be a wonderful thing to be able to help to stretch that client comfort zone. We know that there are lots of emotional connections with money, and lots of emotional financial situations that you may be dealing with: divorce, grief, inheritances, redundancies, for example. You're going to see that emotion in those meetings much more prevalent. We know that they're inherited beliefs. Sometimes haven't even come from that person specifically. And they're often they're left unexamined. This is the biggest challenge. If they're left unexamined, they will still reinforce the thoughts, the emotions, and the behaviors of our clients. So this kind of work is really, really powerful. And that leads us beautifully to the end of our first week with next steps. So while you guys were in your breakout rooms, I've set up a WhatsApp group just for us to continue any conversations or share any links or any questions that you've got. Are you guys happy to all go into a WhatsApp group? Could you let me just stop sharing my screen a sec. Just pop your hands in the air. Is that a good idea? Are you quite comfortable with sharing phone numbers? You can mute WhatsApp, so if it gets too much, you can mute people in there. But let me just, before you all go, let me just share with you the link that I've just set up so you can all go ahead and join. Where's my chat gone? There we go. Right, there we go. That's the WhatsApp group. If you just hit that link, I was going to say I'll share it on WhatsApp, but unless you're in the WhatsApp group, you won't see it. I'll send it out on an email as well tomorrow evening, just in case that link doesn't work on your computer for whatever reason, or just copy and paste that link now onto a notes page or something, but we'll send it out on an email as well. So the homework that you guys are going to have between now and 2 weeks' time for our next session is a self-limiting beliefs exercise and a money diary. Now, I don't want you to spend heaps and heaps of time on the money diary, but I'd like you just to have it somewhere on your desk or by your bedside cabinet, And for every financial conversational decision that's happening for you over the next 2 weeks, it would be great if you could just, there's 5 columns on this exercise, there's 5 questions for you to work through. And I'd like you just to spend literally a couple of minutes just identifying one particular financial, one or more, but at least one financial conversation that's going on for you personally over the next 2 weeks. You don't have to share it, so don't worry about sharing it with anybody. And the self-limiting exercise booklet is a slightly longer booklet, and there's a couple of steps and questions for you to work through over the course of the next 2 weeks. It will take you probably 20 minutes, nothing onerous. But if you could pop some time in your diary to do that exercise after you leave this call today, then that will move it from intention to action, because we need to make sure it goes in the diary, otherwise it doesn't happen. And if you do have any questions about the exercise, then you can use the WhatsApp group for any questions, or obviously please feel free to email me. So thank you so much for joining the first week. I hope you've all enjoyed yourselves, and I'll look forward to seeing you. If you want to join again tomorrow night, please feel free. If you want to go through those exercises again with different groups, but other than that, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. Thanks so much. See you soon, guys.